programs with Rural Business Service. He went on the trip himself to Hawaii and represented our agency. And then when we moved to an online and virtual posture, we stayed involved, not in the first convening because that was virtual. You remember that agenda was slightly truncated, but last year we were involved virtually, and we're happy to be involved again. And sort of in that spirit to continue the growth of advocacy within our agency and bringing different names and faces and voices to the table. That was part of the motivation for designing today's session as a learning circle and bringing in leadership, Mark Brzezinski, Ingrid, Andrea specifically, but we also now have a broader and wider tribal relations team. So I'm going to start with asking Melissa and Chris to introduce themselves, and then we'll turn it over to our program folks so that they can spend a little bit of time introducing themselves and talking about what's going on in their program areas, and then we'll get into the discussion. So Melissa, if you could go first.
Okay, thank you, Ted. Halito, hello. My name is Melissa Sturdivant. I am a citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, and I work as a tribal relations specialist with our national office on Ted's team for USDA Rural Development. And I join you today from the ancestral lands of the Kickapoo and the Comanche in West Central Texas. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris DeFries, and I'm currently in Oklahoma. Prior to working here, I was the Native American coordinator for the 39 federally recognized tribes in Oklahoma. I'm a member of the Ramapo Nipe out of New Jersey, a state tribe, and I'm a member of Ted's team and love the work. You know, when I was working with Rural Development in Oklahoma, one of my favorite things to do was work with the single family housing folks, and just the rewarding feeling that you got when you met with the families and you actually saw them get into that home ownership on, you know, Native American lands or whatever it was always wonderful. So the things that the Native CDFIs do are just so rewarding. Just to be able to spread that word, like Ted said, is just fantastic. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Chris. And then Don Irby, who is also on our team, who Linnell can testify actually exists. He's the shyest tribal relations specialist on our team. He works and lives out of Prescott Valley, Arizona. He was not on at last check. Let me just check one more time to make sure he didn't join us. But he rounds out our team. We're also bringing on what's called a Pathways intern later this summer. A young gentleman from Ohio State is going to be joining our team in August, so we look forward to bringing him on the team. So good news, how I've changed the most since 2018 is when 2018, I was doing this job by myself. And now I have Melissa and Chris and Don, and we'll soon have Gabe to help support us in this work across rural development with Native CDFIs and with tribes all over the country. So that's the tribal relations team. I'm now going to hand it over to Andrea Hively, who can introduce herself and talk about what's going on with Single Family Housing Direct. Andrea?
Hey, good morning. Thank you so much, or afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm Andrea Hively, and I am the branch chief for special programs and new initiatives, which gets the whole gamut of tribal relations. And so I'm really proud to have that on my team. And that falls under the Single Family Housing Direct Loan Division. So we have our guaranteed division here with us, Ms. Ingrid, and then I'm on the direct side. So our programs include the 502 Direct housing loan. It's a subsidized housing loan, and we have plenty of funds this year to make that program happen. It's also the program that we use to fund the South Dakota Native CDFI demo program for the 2 CDFIs that received some of those 502 funds you may have heard of, and then they were able to re-lend those out under the same program rules. So excited to see what Congress does with that program and if we can keep our 502 money going. We also have a lot of American Rescue Plan funds in the 502 program, so we can refinance our own mortgages and make sure that folks that were on a moratorium during the pandemic can come out with a clean slate. And so if you're hearing of borrowers that need to refinance with us, we definitely have funds for that. We also have our 504 loan and grant program. If you haven't heard about it, we can do a 1% loan of $40,000 for up to 20 years. So it's super affordable for those very low income folks. And then also if you're 62 or older, we can go up to $10,000 now in grant assist, lifetime grant assistance for those borrowers. And I think the 504 program is really where we've made the biggest impact in tribal communities. Being from Washington State, we have 30 plus recognized tribes. And I know that I always spent more 504 money than anything else in the tribal areas. So really proud of that program. And just coming to single family housing this year, kind of a compliment, I would say, to the 504 program is our Section 533 Housing Preservation Grant Program. And we did get 16 million in that program this year. And the notice of solicitations for applications went out last month. So that closes July 11th. It is a grant that goes directly to an organization to relend for home repairs. When they relend that for home repairs, you don't have to be 62 or older. You can be any age. You just have to be below the low income. So it actually can stretch a little bit further than our 504 program because you have to be very low in 62. Under this program, the organization can actually charge up to 20% admin costs, and they can serve those that are low income and in any age. Beyond those programs, we also have our Section 523 Mutual Self-Help Housing Program. This is a technical assistance grant, and so it pays for all of your operating costs. About 80% of all those grants goes to operating costs, and then some for equipment and supplies and things like that. But it's mostly to pay your budgets, and we pay those budgets so that you can get groups of families together, and they put in 65% of the labor to build these homes. So it's really a huge commitment. But what comes out on the other end is what we call sweat equity, and so those homeowners usually get a 502 direct loan, and the 523 grant pays your costs to help them build those homes over a 12-month period. We got about 5 or 6 homes done under a self-help grant in South Dakota with Thunder Valley. So we were really proud of that it was kind of half of what they intended to do, but half is better than nothing. And so we would definitely like to see more 523 grants and home building done on reservations throughout this great nation. We also have a site loan program that often is underutilized and folks don't seem to know about, but we have $5 million if you would like to loan that. And I think we're at 3% or 3.5% coming up next month to do development of land so that you can actually build homes. And those are kind of our flagship programs, and we're well funded. I cannot believe tomorrow ends the 3rd quarter and we're busted into the 4th quarter, but we want to go all the way through until September 30th in spending, and we need you to do that. So if any of those programs interested you, I'd be happy to talk to you more about them offline or get you with your state contacts, because at Rural Development, we are set up so that the national office is at one level, and then we have our state offices, and then from there, there's local or area offices that often you'll be in contact with as well. Did I go over my 5 minutes, Ted? Sometimes I talk fast, sometimes I don't say enough.
You're at just about 5 minutes, so well done.
Got it all in. Perfect. Well, I'll pass the mic then. Thank you guys for letting me be part of this.
We can put in some links to the program information, whether you're interested in home ownership programs or home repair that Andrea mentioned. I will just sort of underscore, there's a couple ways we can directly partner with Native CDFIs through loan packaging, through the pilot project. If that were to expand, we'll have a chance to work with more Native CDFIs directly in our housing programs in that regard. And we understand and recognize that our best partners in the space are the TDHEs, the tribal designated housing entities, and your Native CDFIs that are providing resources alongside of and sometimes complementing and filling spaces and areas where the TDHE and tribe aren't able to reach. So if there's other ways we can work with you on our direct programs, we're always looking for opportunities to partner with you, informal and informal ways. So, and big shout out to Andrea, always been a wonderful supportive presence in single family housing for our work in tribal areas. So thanks. Ingrid, you're next, 502 Guaranteed.
Thank you. I'm Ingrid Ripley. I'm the Executive Director for the Single Family Guarantee. I'm new to the program, and in addition to another single family housing program besides the Direct. I know most of you are more familiar with the Direct, but we here at Guarantee are also available for you. There's a lot of emphasis that I've put in my first year here. I started in my role last July 4th. It's going to be a year coming this weekend. So it's going to be a year that I've been here, and the administration's focus has been on Native tribes and areas that are depressed. So we are focusing in that areas, and we're mainly focusing on providing Native American learning. First of all, learning. We're new in the area of that we are putting this emphasis in. So we need to listen and hear from you on what is the needs of the Native tribes. And Ted has been very grateful in introducing us. We've been in a couple of sessions with multiple CDFIs and spoken about our program and the things that we can do for our program and the things that we can do in the program. And that has allowed us to be able to think about and listen to many of the tribes on things that they find challenging in some of our programs. So there's a couple of conversations that we had that have driven us to do some research on ways that we can move some barriers in ways that we can help increase the use of our guarantee loan program. In the CDFI world, we learned that sometimes is the lack of capital that you have. So we're actually working with one of the CDFIs, smallest CDFI, that's working on trying to help her bring partnership with a lender that they will be able to sell the loans to, and they will have that capital to reinvest in those communities. So we're working, with a couple CDFIs to sign them up as part of our program. But we've also met with many tribes. We've had conversations at many conferences, and there are two main things that have come up that they spoke to us about their challenges. One has been the evaluation of the properties, the challenges that they've had with that. And we've come back and look at what those challenges are and see our program to see what is it that we can do to tweak it, or if we have to get waivers, or if we have to do something to make it easier for the lending community to be able to use our program and lend in these communities. So we are looking for those kinds of things that will help us increase our program in those areas. Another challenge that we heard that we are looking at is the fact that many Native Americans, they inherit their properties, and the properties are really falling apart. And then there is no ability to get financing to help in fixing them up. Our program has what we call, I know FHA has a 203K, where we have a program that can help with the rehabilitation of the property, but there has to be a purchase. So we're looking to see if we can tweak something where we can allow that kind of situation, because it is unique to the Native tribes, where we would allow them to be able to use our program in what is called a purchase, but only for the Native tribes, but it's because there is no title in that sense. So when we hear something, as we go out on the road and speak to many tribes, we come back and we look at our policy, and we talk with Ted and a bunch of group of us, and we said, it says, hey, what is it that we can do? Can we tweak it here? Can we change it here? So those are the two biggest things that we have been, what we heard that we're looking to tweak. I'm here to, again, listen and see if there's anything that you guys can tell us that our program is difficult in, or the challenge that you have with our program that you're not able to use for the Native tribes. And then, we can go from that direction and see how we can help in that area. The second thing that I'm focused on is our single close construction. I think right now, with the market problem that we have with lack of housing out in the market, and people wanting to, able to construct their own homes, that our single close program is really a great program for our lenders and for you CDFIs, in the sense that you are guaranteed, it's a one-time close, and you get the guarantee right up front. So that makes it a lot simpler for you as a lender to be able to execute and the construction of the loan and into the final end. So we're definitely focusing on that area too. The other area to help with the housing stock issue that we're having nationwide is we're looking at manufacturing housing, and what is it that we need to improve in that area to help also use our program in those areas. all of the agencies have been asked to take a look at your programs and see how to improve them. One of the things that we're looking at is chattel lending. We heard that that is your biggest challenge out there in that kind of lending. And we're looking to see if there's any possibility that we can do something like that. We have regulations that we have to follow, so we have to make sure that at least it falls within the Housing Act, but we are looking. You tell us an idea, we come back, we look at our regulations and policies and see where we talk to legal and say, hey, is this a possibility? They've given us some ideas and say, yeah, you'll be able to do that, but you have to do this. So, that's the what we're working on. Okay, now we're going to do this in order to see if we can do that. So I'm here to learn again, to listen and see where we can help and where we can help you become a lender so you can use our program. And I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Ingrid. I'm actually going to commit a cardinal sin and ask you a follow-up question and have Mark wait just another minute. I know you just were in South Dakota, so any impressions or memories you want to share from your recent trip to South Dakota?
Yes, it was really eye-opening. There was a great project that they have, a plan development unit that is really unique in the sense that it had multifamily properties in it. They had single family housing, which they have a contractor that they're using for manufacturing housing, that area is a phase where all the properties are going to be in look kind of alike because it's a specific manufacturing housing that they're using. But then they're going to have another phase area where the property owners will buy the land and they can put whatever property they want on it. So that uniqueness of giving flexibility to all the possible needs of the tribe is really pretty interesting to us. One of the advantages that they had was that they were able to get from the BIA permission, and they don't have to go back for every loan that they make to get BIA permission. Now those properties are already settled in their category and they make the decision at that point. So I think that is going to be an area that we would like to focus on and to bring a lot of our program. And with these additional changes that we're looking to make to the program, I think they will benefit. They were very eager and very excited to hear all the things that we're looking to possibly change so that we can make it simpler for them to be able to use our program.
Yeah, and you were at Cheyenne River, correct? You met with Cheyenne
Yes.
River Housing Authority and 4 bands, community fund, and also a private lender. Didn't you have a chance to meet with a private lender as well who was interested in 502 guarantee? Did you meet with First Tribal?
We didn't get to meet with them. We're talking
Okay.
on the phone with them so that they can meet with the CFI 4 band. So that comes with what I said at the beginning, trying to bring that capital into the smaller CDFIs that are really embedded in the tribes.
Fantastic. Well, without further ado, we'll move on to Mark Brzezinski next to introduce himself and talk a little bit about what's going on at Rural Business and Cooperative Services at RD. Mark, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Ted. And yes, thank you and welcome to all joining this afternoon. So I'm glad to have the opportunity to connect with you and talk a little bit about our programs. Many of you know rural development and rural business cooperative service programs are a wide variety of loans, grants, and guaranteed loans to assist in business and economic development. Today, I thought I'd focus just on a couple, some programs that are available directly to assist Native CDFIs, either in providing funding for lending or lending programs, or programs that may help in accessing other funds. And then I'll just highlight a couple of relatively new programs of which Native CDFIs may be asked to join as a partnership, an active partner in some program activities. So first up, a couple of our standard, more traditional programs of which we have funding yet available, and actually some underutilization of funding. That is in the Intermediary Lending Program and the Rural Micro Entrepreneur Assistance Program, so the IRP and RMAP programs. These are just more of our traditional programs, standard programs with funding available. Both those programs work where we have loan funds low interest rate loans, either 1% or a 2% interest rate loan. We would make a loan to a CDFI, Native CDFI. You use the funds to capitalize a revolving loan fund and re-lend the funds for business and economic development projects. The IRP can go up to loans at the business level for loans up to $450,000. Our loan to the CDFI can be up to $2 million. The RMAP, the Rural Micro Entrepreneur Assistance Program, focuses on much smaller. So these are loans to the business level of less than $50,000. And our loan to the intermediary could be up to $500,000 on an annual basis. I think a key point of the RMAP program, it also includes grant funding. The grants are available to the lender, to the intermediary, to be used to provide technical assistance and other assistance to your borrowers. So it's a great aspect of not only providing lending, but other technical assistance and development assistance to micro entrepreneurs. We have a new program that's similar to these two, to the IRP and RMAP. It's the Meat and Poultry Intermediary Lending Program. We call it the MPILP. It is a grant program which Native CDFIs are eligible. So you can apply for a grant under this program. Again, the grant funds are used to establish a loan fund. The initial use of the loan must be to a meat or poultry processing facility. When that loan is repaid, then the funds may be used for any purpose around the food supply chain. So it could be other types of foods or other purposes kind of within the chain, including storage, distribution, et cetera. So again, that's a grant program. The grant could be up to $15 million. Just a reminder that again, the first use of that grant is for meat and poultry processing. And we do have some discussions with potential around bison and other products within that program. So some great opportunity there. So those three programs actually provide direct funds or could provide funds to Native CDFIs. Keep in mind some guaranteed loan programs. A guaranteed loan could assist a CDFI by providing the guarantee, of course, reducing your risk on a loan, but also enable then the guaranteed portion to be sold on secondary market. So it's another way of accessing funding and kind of recapitalizing your lending opportunities. Within guarantees, within Rural Business Cooperative Service, we have three programs now: the Business and Industry Program, the Rural America Energy Program, the REAP program, and a new program we stood up, that's the Food Supply Chain Guaranteed Loan Program. All three of those programs, again, Native CDFIs are eligible. When we rolled out what we refer to as the 1RD Guaranteed Loan Initiative, we expanded opportunities for lenders in the Indian country and lenders that really qualify for lending, such as Native CDFIs. Some provisions, I think, that provide more opportunities. So if you haven't looked at the guaranteed programs as becoming a lender under the programs recently, I would urge you to talk to us a little further. We think there are some great opportunities for Native CDFIs to be lenders in those programs. Again, that's the B&I program, the REAP program, and the Food Supply Chain Guaranteed Loan Program. One additional program that Native CDFIs are eligible for is our Rural Business Development Grant Program. That is a grant made to nonprofit or public entities to be used to assist small and emerging businesses. The grant could be used for a wide variety of purposes, could be used to establish a revolving loan fund, typically smaller activities or smaller funds. The grant could be used for technical assistance and for other purposes to assist other enterprises. Again, that's more of a traditional grant program. Unfortunately, the program has closed for this fiscal year, but we are starting to take applications for next fiscal year in that program. Two programs I thought I'd mention, of which Native CDFIs may be interested in as formal partners. So these are programs that require either a consortium or a partnership as an applicant. Relatively new program is our RISE program. It's the Rural Innovation Stronger Economy, so RISE. That is a grant program that's made to a rural partnership for job and economic development. We do have a couple of tribes that are interested in that program. A program that we also stood up this year on a pilot basis is the Rural Energy Pilot Program. Again, that program also requires a partnership of which Native CDFIs could be a partner. That program provides grant funds to the partnership to undertake renewable energy or energy efficiency projects at a community level. That program right now is accepting applications. And there again, we do have a couple of tribal groups that we're talking to engaged in quite deeply in providing them some assistance on an application process. So there's, I think, a couple of highlights I thought I'd start with. Hopefully that offers some thoughts for you for some further discussion, and glad to engage in some Q&A and ongoing conversation. So thank you, Ted.
Thank you, Mark. So glad you're able to join us and share. Appreciate all your work for tribes in rural areas. So we've got not pretty much a full hour now, and we had a rough blackout of how we'd like the agenda to unfold from here. You can see the next title was Impressions of what has worked well for Native CDFIs with rural development programs and resources. But I'm also going to put a hold on that for just a second and just let folks, if you'd like to ask follow-up questions or if something pricked your interest at Mark or Ingrid or Andrea, rather than waiting on that for some time while it's fresh in your mind, I'll give folks an opportunity just to respond and to ask our RD colleagues any questions you might have, or if you want to share any thoughts. And be on alert, because the rest of the session we're going to help facilitate the discussion, but it's really your time to talk. So if it helps, folks can come on camera and sort of create this virtual learning circle that we had envisioned. And the more we're able to share, the more we're able to learn from your experiences and your colleague Native CDFIs. That's the intent. So any questions or follow-up for Ingrid, Andrea, or Mark?
Hi, this is Elena Peterson. I have a question.
Yes, definitely.
Maybe this is a Mark question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, but could you also just say where you're from? And...
Oh, sorry. Yeah, my name is Elena Peterson. I'm the executive director for Spruce Root, which is a Native CDFI based in Southeast Alaska. And so we do small business lending. We were a recipient of IRP funds very early on. That was some of the first lending capital that we got. And we were able to deploy about half of it. And then we, the term ended. And so we weren't able to deploy all of the IRP funding by the time that term ended. Is it possible for us to re-enter the program, or can you give any guidance on that?
Certainly. Yeah, absolutely. It is. We accept applications on an ongoing basis for the IRP program. We've had some lenders that, yes, had some challenges maybe in executing a loan or loan activity, as long as the loan is current as far as in repayment, and there aren't any financial issues with the entity itself. Yes, we can entertain further applications. We encourage CDFIs to kind of look at what's your capacity. And apply for funds that you can use relatively quickly, and then resubmit applications. As I think we can go up to I think it was $10 million total of outstanding for the IRP program, so quite a bit of capacity. The IRP does have a set aside of funds for Native intermediaries, and that typically goes unused. So I would definitely extend the opportunity to take a look at that. We do have a state office up in Alaska that works with the program. So feel free to connect with them or with us to provide more insight if you need any assistance.
Yeah, we're planning to reach out. We kind of did an overhaul of our CDFI program and are ready to launch some new products and things and go after more capital. So you're on our list to reach out to, but I figured I could just get that first question answered pretty quickly. So appreciate it. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to that next meeting with y'all. And Mark mentioned our program directors in Alaska. I believe Robert Chambers now is doing multiple duty as both community programs and rural business. He probably had worked with the previous program director for business programs, but there's been a change there. And I know that our staff, our leadership's visited Southeast a number of times with the Southeast Sustainable Development work that's going on. So we appreciate you and your partnership on that front, and just the work you do in and throughout Southeast.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. No, we've had such a good working relationship with the RD folks up in Palmer, and yeah, we're reestablishing a relationship with the new leader there, and so it's all good. And yeah, change is difficult, but we have to. So it's the challenge we're always up against, I suppose. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
For sure.
Thank you
And
though.
I'll try to embarrass Mark a little bit. You might think of him as a Washington, D.C. wonk, but there was a time when he was both community programs director and rural business programs director in one of our state offices. He came from Wisconsin, which is where I first met him.
Oh,
So he
great.
is a policy wonk, so I'll tease him a little bit. It's probably past the point of me being able to make him blush, but he started really deep in our programs and has that history that he brought with. So.
Yeah, that's helpful. That's great. Thank you.
Other questions or impressions or thoughts right off the bat? If not, Linnell, if you could post sort of the 3 blocks of time we have sort of cordoned off. First, we wanted to start off on a positive note as much as we could and just talk about positive experiences you've had, not so that we feel good about ourselves, but so that others might be able to know what's worked well in your organization and take advantage of a similar program or a similar opportunity. Secondly, we were going to dive into challenges. So we'd want to hear directly about some of the challenges that you might have faced. And then thirdly, looks like I'll have to do it because it stops right at the 2:05. Thirdly, we were going to talk about any projects or applications you're considering. And if you have more technical questions, maybe along the lines of what Spruce Root just asked, we're happy to entertain very specific issues and timely exchange of information as well. So let's, Melissa, if you could maybe read that first discussion question. I'm going to go back in and get the agenda fully posted back in the chat. Can you do that, of course?
Maybe you might have lost Melissa. I'm not.
How about Chris then?
You can do it, yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
What are the top 2 or 3 challenges you have encountered while working in Indian country while working with USDA Rural Development programs? And that's from any of our CDFI representatives. You could just kind of let us know what the challenges are, 2 to 3 challenges that you faced.
Within RD, was that the?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a specific example. I know that, again, IRP, we were trying to lend out the one of the unique things about RD is that, you know, we weren't able to lend on anything that was considered agriculture because there's a whole other division that had programs for that. And it was interesting because, you know, agriculture here in Southeast Alaska is not like, doesn't fit the mold of agriculture in the rest of the country. And so there was a couple projects that we weren't able to get funding because of that nuance and the interpretation, which, you know, it was what it was. Where we were able to find success in funding was through hydroponic. We were able to do a hydroponic business and use IRP funds for that. And so that worked. So I guess that's a very specific example, but it was our ability to deploy also it was difficult sometimes to meet the criteria given our unique types of businesses and just making sure that it matched up. Otherwise, you know, the other feedback I'd give is positive, which was that the staff in the RD department were so helpful in navigating the guidelines, because a lot of times, you know, with other agencies for other programs, it's like, well, read the guidelines, and that's the guidance we give, and we go, okay, well, this is how I'm interpreting it, you know, and then you're kind of met with like a wall of like, no, the answer is no. But, you know, whereas I always felt like RD, the state office was so great at helping us not only interpret guidelines, but then advocate up to whoever and not just sort of leave us hanging. And it didn't always result in like a positive answer, but I always felt like supported. So for whatever that's worth, that feedback, you know, I just felt like RD has always stood out to me as like an agency, a model agency, and how they worked with us as a CDFI and how they helped us do our best to try and deploy that money, and then also to access other funds. So they always were sharing, you know, the funding opportunities and helping us figure out how to match the funding opportunity with the project we were doing. Just that level of one-on-one support was amazing and kind of pretty unprecedented. But yeah, what was the RBDG funding? That one was also tough to try and match the activities we were doing with TA. And I think that one required like new projects. And so if it was ongoing, that was a tough thing. We had to show that it was new and different. I'm forgetting the nuance there, but there was some tricky thing. And so it's those little caveats that make it hard to maybe access the funding. And again, the folks try, you know, have always tried to help us navigate those things, but at some point there's not much they can do. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that response. And it warms my heart to hear that you've got a good relationship with the local RD office. And that's what we always try to strive for, is to have that interaction with all of our entities. And we would like to say that that's the truth, you know, in every state, but unfortunately, that's not the truth. You know, it's just, we're working on it continuously, but improvement. And one of the key things before we move on to the next question is, I'd like to know if anybody else with the CDFIs have any challenges. And then Ted, go.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Mark, just as he's had some experience, I could share a little bit, but I think Mark maybe is a little more adept and practiced, and obviously he runs the program. But how do you kind of advise folks if you were to be asked? So I'll ask you, when we sort of run into the line between Farm Service Agency and ag, and especially Native communities whose economic systems, in part, especially in Alaska and seafood, are in sort of a gray area when it comes to ag production, and how they could maybe use IRP or some of our programs differently. Because I know some of our programs can be a little more aggressive in that space. Can't really do production ag, but any thoughts?
Yeah, that's some great questions. And actually, we've been wrestling with that even more so recently with some of the programs we're standing up around food supply chain, as to obviously needing to start with the ag production piece. But yeah, there's part of our when establishing programs is that we have to be concerned with duplicating of efforts or duplicating other programs. So, for example, the IRP program, yes, does have some limitations in a sense of assisting funding ag production. And as Ted mentioned, I think the start of it is to needing to understand what could be eligible for Farm Service Agency type of financing or programs. If there are activities eligible under FSA, it likely would not be eligible under something that we could do with our programs. But that said, we do have, and depending on the program, like some of our business and industry program does very specifically states and refers to some ag production that we could finance around, as you mentioned, hydroponics, aquaculture, and those type of activities could be within our programs. I know we did some editing for our IRP program, and I was just trying to, as I'm listening here, is also search through a reg real quick to see if we clarified that within the IRP program. But I understand for the most part, production activities that are not more traditional ag could fall within some of our other programs. So IRP may have some flexibility, especially around some aquaculture, mariculture, and those types of activities. If there are processing,
we were able to get mariculture. We were able to get some funding for that.
Okay, and if there are processing activities associated with, so let's say if a harvester is not only harvesting but also processing, and the loan is used for a little bit of both, there's also some flexibility. So within that. Okay.
And someone else has joined us from USDA. I thought about Office of Tribal Relations. So Josiah Griffin has joined us. You're welcome to say hello, but they've been pushing, tribes have been pushing, and OTR has been advocating for tribes across USDA's program, particularly with bison, but just for sort of underscoring that what on the surface USDA might have traditionally considered ag or ag production is really sort of was this subsistence and continues to be the subsistence economies of tribal communities. So what looks like economic development just in the extreme, like an industrial park and X business and Y business in that industrial park, isn't the same in tribal communities. So Josiah, if you want to say hello and say anything along those lines, much appreciated.
Thanks, Ted. So for those of you who I haven't met before, aloha makako. My name is Josiah Griffin. I am Hawaiian Samoan, and as Ted mentioned, I work under Heather Dawn Thompson in the Office of Tribal Relations. The Office of Tribal Relations work is cross-cutting across all of USDA, principally to advise the Secretary on tribal issues and to serve as a single point of contact for consultation and the issues that are impacting Indian country. And through Heather Dawn's leadership, we've been taking a renewed look at how we engage tribal issues, how we engage and how our programs haven't been historically developed with Indian country's interest in mind. And as Ted mentioned, bison is at the core of many of these issues because of the historic focus on the more westernized form of agriculture. And so trying to change hearts and minds across the department to look at things through a new way and to consider where we can provide greater flexibility for those topics or for those areas that speak to the hearts and minds of tribal people. And among those topics, identifying and working with Ted and his team on opportunities to better engage and more robustly partner with Native CDF, the Native CDFI network and Native community development financial institutions is a big part of this. It's largely why in the tribal consultation on equity for economic development, we reached out to the Native CDFI network, as well as the National Center for American Indian Economic Enterprise Development, and others, to both get the word out and to be partners with us in facilitating tribal caucus discussion. Because we recognize that these issues in a much greater detail in many ways than many of the folks on our side. And so we look forward to future opportunities like these to not only kind of rely on each other to spread the word, but also to see where we can work together more effectively.
Thank you, Josiah. And I always appreciate your partnership and encouragement. So other thoughts, maybe from someone else that's joined from another institution. If not, I see Melissa's back, but I'll have Chris ask the next sort of discussion question. There, I put them all in the chat just so that you could see the extent of things that we had envisioned talking about. We don't have to stick to script because it's pretty loose. But remember, we both have the business programs and the housing folks on the line, so we can go back and forth between sort of the core business programs and our single family housing programs. Chris.
This is an excellent question, I think. What makes working with Native American CDFIs in Indian country different than a traditional lending institution? And if you can also touch on why the Native CDFI loans are so well put together and they usually go to fruition versus some of the traditional loans that don't make it. That would be a very good feedback if you could answer that question. Things like the counseling and the education that you provide and the one-on-one, that kind of stuff. I know you guys are all proud of it. Come on.
I was reading, don't worry, we're not afraid of dead air. We'll use that as an instigator to get folks to come off camera and talk. But I see a couple other Native CDFIs. So just a reminder, this is your chance to pepper us with questions and feedback.
I don't want to keep talking, but I could answer.
Go ahead. I think
Please.
it'd be great.
Well, yeah, the thing that came to my mind was just our TA. You know, I just know for a fact that the amount of time and energy we put in with clients is what pays off in our low default rate. And you know, what was so wonderful about our story is that we put a lot more attention on growing the TA side of our programming before we invested in the lending. And we were able to achieve that through grants, right? So to be able to apply to get funding from CDFI fund, USDA, you know, the RBDG, there's a few different programs early on that we tapped into that funded our ability to pay staff so that they could then build programs around TA. And at the same time, we worked to, you know, bring in under some sort of underwriting and loan, you know, lending solution so that we could build that side as well. But it definitely didn't get as much attention. You know, we worked on our policies and we got support from OESTA and Craft 3 and some other major players in the CDFI space, and they helped provide that guidance to build up the lending side of our operations. But we invested in the TA, and we really appreciated that support so that we could do that. And then now, because we invested in that side, we actually built up our services in a way that we could then generate additional revenue through the TA side. And so we ended up putting ourselves in a position where we didn't need to have the CDFI loans subsidizing our TA, which is typically the way it goes. And so the lending, there's not as much pressure to get loans through as much as there is pressure to like provide the TA and the quality programs and continue to get funding for those. And so so to have like a diverse, you know, source of funding programs, and USDA has quite a few. I think they're probably USDA is the main funder of Spruce Root over the years, I'd say, the main agency to provide funding programs that we could access, and primarily through RD. You know, that was huge for us. And so and then, you know, to my original point was that our TA, the quality of our TA programs really meet the different variety of needs that we're finding in our communities, right? There's some people that already have some business experience, and so they need a little bit more advanced TA support to really clean up their practices and make sure they're learning the skills and best practices that maybe they didn't ever get instruction on when they first got into entrepreneurship. But then also to create space for Indigenous people to enter in the business place and take a hobby or an activity and maybe explore what that could look like to try and turn it into a business. And that level of TA definitely takes a lot more time. It doesn't turn into a loan overnight. Building a relationship with a client, it means you have to spend time with them face to face, which for us means you have to travel to a whole nother community through a boat or a plane. And so there's just the time and costs associated with the TA, the level of TA that we needed to provide required, grant funding, and our loan income wasn't going to cover that. So for what that's worth, that sort of was my first response to the question as I heard it.
So customer service is a big part of what you would say that you do?
Yeah, customer service. I mean, and I've been trying to, so we like figured out our own CRM system, right? We just sort of hacked created our own with Google and Asana and some different things that aren't made to be CRM. And that's something right now that we're trying to solve for, is like a good CRM solution. Because that's another important piece to this, is like, if we can't actually keep track of all, like we have so many clients now that we've built up and they're lost in Excel spreadsheets, we need something that's more robust that can also then talk to down home, also talk, so there's not one solution we're finding. And this is a common issue across all, I'm guessing all native CDFIs, perhaps all CDFIs, but definitely the smaller native ones. We need some better data collection management, CRM. And we actually wrote a grant earlier this year to pay, I don't remember who we wrote it to. I don't know if it was USDA. Well, anyways, we submitted a grant proposal for investing in in a software solution And so we're trying to think in innovative ways that way too. And I think it's stuff like this. It's having these conversations that gives us the idea that, oh, we could actually create the solution ourselves. Okay, let's try that. And so yeah, for us, customer relationships huge and managing that. And yeah.
Thank you so much. Ted?
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe to relate this back to some efforts that Andrea and Ingrid have sort of been working on. Andrea mentioned the 502 relending pilot, which at its core was sort of built around the IRP program. It's based on authority we don't have, so we can only do it in a pilot sort of model mode to test out to see if it works. But part of the rationale is exactly to your point, Alana, is that we believe those loans are going to perform better and be better investments because the CDFIs on the ground are making those loans and underwriting those loans, underwriting sort of in your own relationship building, technical assistance providing, all the beautiful ways that you build clients, whether it's for business or for, in this case, homeownership loans. And we're excited because the department did ask for money in the 23 budget to expand that program to other CDFIs. So there's been a lot of chatter since that was announced on how we were going to expand it. So the agency has requested money, and it did make it into the House approps draft for next year. We don't know what will happen, but we're interested to know your thoughts on what that would look like if we did expand it. And then this is kind of, I hate asking multiple questions, but I want to sort of see what folks are thinking on both accounts. And then on the Ingrid front with 502 guaranteed programs, there's a way for us to approve non-traditional, non-supervised lenders. And so a lot of our discussions with Native CDFIs have been how we can bend the program as best we can so that you can support your home ownership clients in a way that doesn't compromise the way you would customarily do that. And it allows you to churn capital, to Ingrid's point, and to have a guarantee behind it. So you might not even need the guarantee, but when you go to either securitize or potentially sell that loan, that guarantee, whether it's a HUD guarantee or ours, makes it much more marketable, which can make your loan funds can introduce some liquidity into your loan fund. So looking for, these aren't in the discussion questions, but I thought maybe we could get some responses on those specific things, the pilot program and potential expansion, and challenges and opportunities with becoming a guaranteed lender in our 502 programs. Any thoughts or ideas folks are willing to share on that front? And Andrea or Ingrid, if you want to put a finer point on it, that could help as well.
One of the questions would be, what is have they used our program? I would like to know if they used our program, and if they have, of course, what challenges they found, and if they haven't, why they haven't.
You can also put stuff in the chat. If you're not a big talker or on camera person, feel free to answer questions in the chat or ask questions in the chat. Just mention that as well.
And I'm not a big fan of putting people on the spot, but I since we have a co-host in Awista, I wonder if Linnell has anything to share on that front from her perspective as an intermediary CDFI that has used RD's programs and is in the business of providing technical assistance to you all. So any thoughts, Linnell?
Oh, way to put me on the spot, Ted.
Well,
No.
the only reason I did it is because it's your conference and in part you're being paid, so I apologize.
No, and I love RD products, and I just mainly want to just highlight like how my former CDFI utilized 502. We served the Navajo Nation, which was definitely a rural geography, and so the rural lending products were great fits for a lot of our clients. And then also with the loan grant options, those were great. So we're definitely, we're highly utilized as far as the lending products available. And then from the OESTA front, we definitely want to provide support to organizations and CDFIs that want to tap into the different types of lending products. I sat in a session in Seattle at the NIHC conference, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is perfect for our homeownership folks, because sometimes you're the best kept secret for whatever reason, and being able to tap additional products to utilize in a packaging way or as a direct lender. I think that's really helpful to grow in that mortgage homeownership space. So those are my 2 cents. Ted.
Thank you. And I owe you at least 2 cents, so thanks. Tasha, I saw you came on camera. Is there something that you'd be willing to share?
Yeah, I just want to let you guys know I don't really have too much input. It is good to know and learn more of these programs and how you guys are trying to be more open. I'm a loan officer for Naming Poo Fund here in Lapwai, Idaho, pretty rural. But we are just tapping into the housing program, our housing side on our products here. We are just about to roll out a home rehab loan, and it's kind of like a pilot program right now. But before this, before I worked for Naming Poo Fund, I worked for First Nations community. Sorry, I just forgot. It's been a while, but that was back in Wisconsin, and we were a packager for RD. Their, I think it was a home rehab 502. Does that sound right? And I had a problem over there trying to get people to go through the whole process because of how long the application process was. And I know we're kind of talking about getting into it, or I was just kind of talking about getting into it in my program over here. So like I said, it's new to the this organization here, and I'm kind of just doing like the background work and trying to figure out what's out there, because like I said, we're just starting off with the home rehab, and I know the tribe wants us to eventually get into mortgages and providing mortgages for the tribal community. So just kind of here just to learn, to see what you guys have and see what other Native CDFIs are doing as well. So
thank you. And maybe it looks like Andrea's already out mute. So do you want to talk about packaging both with home repair loans first? Because it sounds like maybe that was the program, and then maybe packaging with the home ownership programs too.
Sure, absolutely. And thank you for that feedback. We do hear a lot that our application package is a bit overwhelming. And I really wish we had one of those beautiful online systems like all the other lenders do, where you can just put in your information question-wise versus getting a 10-page application, or as a packager looking at our 12-page checklist and being like, oh my goodness, there is so much to do here. But we do really, even as underwriters in the States, rely on those checklists that are in our handbook. It's in chapter 3 and chapter 12. Chapter 12 is for the home repairs, but I am really, really close to hopefully being able to clear a new 1-page application for that 504 loan or grant program. So hopefully that will help with your clients, because it is very overwhelming. And I think a lot of people don't apply with us because they just see the application and there's no way I can figure that out. And everything we're going to ask for, it's a lot of work, that's for sure. So I thank you for mentioning that. And we do recognize that, and we're trying to find ways to make it easier. But as a packager, we do have packaging trainings. Now they are vary in price depending on which one of our 2 housing providing intermediaries offer it. But we have seen some free trainings or even state like sponsored trainings, and Ted and I would be happy to put on something like that for you and your organization through the state that you're working with, so that you can get some local on the ground underwriter feedback too. But our packaging class, if you become a certified packager and you work through an intermediary, you can actually charge up to $17.50 per application package, and part of that's shared with the intermediary. But it is a great way to bring in extra capital. On the 504 repair program, you don't have to be certified to be a packager. You can charge up to $750, I believe it is now, for a 504 package, but the applicant does pay for that. So I know sometimes folks are a little bit like, oh, I wish Rural Development was paying for that. And I do too, but we just don't have any money in that pot anymore. It used to be back in the day, but not anymore. So we do have some state-based trainings. We have the national trainings, which I believe there's one this 3rd week in August, put on by NeighborWorks. And so I'll put into the chat a link to the packager webpage. That can be really helpful too, because there are, I think, at least 1 or 2 trainings on there, but they don't really go into depth the way that maybe you would like. So definitely trying to attend one of those packager trainings, or getting with the state or us to help put on a training could be very helpful. But the checklist is something I go to every single time I ever run to Rota File, because I know I would forget something. I can't remember 12 pages all the time every day, but thank you for your efforts and bringing our programs to the community. I hope I touched on all the things you said. Ted, anything to add? Or?
Well, let's have Tasha respond and see if we got everything that she'd asked about. And if not, then either way, I'll say something after she does.
Okay, yeah, perfect. No, that was, like I said, that was my past job, my past employer. And I know I keep in touch with my former employees as well, our coworkers as well. And I know they took over that as well. And one of them had reached out to me and it's like, how did you do this? You know, like it's hard getting people to come in here, all the paperwork. And it was losing people, you know, after the processing or after the application and getting everything together, then sending it to USDA and making sure they had everything. If I missed something, reaching back out to the client. So it's just like back and forth. And then, you know, the fee that you guys can, or that we could put on there as well for being a packager, that kind of like deterred everybody. Like, I don't want to pay for more. So kind of like, that was another thing. But it was helpful. I can let my past coworkers let them know that, you know, there is training out there and that you guys are going to try to minimize the application more, because I know that they had touched on that as well. And I got to go for a second because my baby's crying.
Sure, absolutely. Priorities. Thank you so much, Tasha.
That's an important business to tend to there. What I was going to add, Andrea, is that in the past, we have tried to be creative with like folks from the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition and provide packaging training specifically for Native CDFIs and TDHEs that are interested in learning more about either packaging and the 502 program. That's the great thing about doing the training, is if you do it, not only could you be a packager, you're qualified to become a packager. One of the prerequisites is doing that training, but you also understand the program from a much more granular level. And when you're working with your own clients, the folks that you serve every day, you'd be better able to be like, oh, you'd be a really good candidate maybe for a 502 loan or a 504 grant or whatever the case may be. So there was a time we talked to OWISTA about how we could maybe partner with them to do some tribal specific loan packaging training. So we don't want to promise anything, but we also don't want to close the door on any of those opportunities. So if there's ways we can make it more available or more affordable, the training itself to Native communities and Native CDFIs, we're open to ideas on that front. Also, currently there's not a Native intermediary that sort of reviews those intermediary packages. We had one in the past that was a Native CDFI. And for the most part, those intermediaries, all they're doing is checking the work to make sure the package is complete. And they've done so many that they know what to expect from a complete package. But I do think it would help if at one point we got to a place where, once again, there was a Native intermediary where the different tribal packagers could sort of bounce it off of this entity that's got not only a Native mission, but Native know-how that's specific to tribal trust land specifically, because it is a unique set of skills. So interested in those opportunities moving forward as well, because I think part of the problem is economies of scale. So potentially a Native packager could be working with multiple tribal communities potentially. And if there were that sort of Native intermediary packager that they could bounce things off, that might make it feel more comfortable and more appropriate for your environment. So we've worked at trying to incubate interest there with Native CDFIs, but whether it's through the Native CDFI network or WISTO or others, we're open to suggestions, not only today, but moving forward. Andrea, were you going to say something?
I'm just noticing there is some activity in the chat, so I don't know if we need to address any of these questions here yet or not. If they fall in, or some of them are statements, but the first one I see moving backwards in time. I'm not a CDFI, but I am currently doing research to see if we can organize a CDFI in our area of upstate New York. I'm looking at a planning grant. In my previous employment for TDH, we did access USDA's 502 and 504, and it's very helpful for the community. Awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. So I'm not sure. I know housing doesn't have any planning grants for something like that, but maybe CF or business programs. I'm not 100% sure. Teddy.
I'll ask Mark to come back on again. And I think this is a good place where the Native CDFI programs at the CDFI fund and the RD programs can sort of help. With the Rural Business Development Grant, you can look at feasibility of studies, and you can use the money for seed capital before you're approved as a CDFI. So I don't know, I don't have a running tally. I probably should, but a lot of Native CDFIs got their original loan capital to relend from RD and then went through the certification process with the Community Development Financial Institutions Fund, because one of the criteria is you have to be a lending institution in order to be a CDFI. So we see the programs as quite complementary. But Mark, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think your reference to the Rural Business Development Grant would be appropriate. I guess it would depend a little bit as to the intent of the planning. Under the Rural Business Development Grant, there is what we refer to as an opportunity grant component, and that is for planning purposes, but it's really to focus more on the economic development planning. So if the CDFI fund, if the planning for the fund is around let's say the community you're serving and how the community needs to work through some economic development planning, I think that's where the opportunity grant funds could be used. But I think as far as for the entity itself, for CDFI, I think Ted, I think you're right as to with Treasury, some of the support there. I know they have some additional funding, some new programs available. If you haven't looked recently, I think you may want to follow up with Treasury on some of their activities. But we are also going to host some training opportunities for intermediaries around the MP ILP program. So it's lending around meat and poultry and food systems. That's basically a program we're just putting together, and we hope to have that out later this summer.
Yeah, and I guess I'll ask the audience just to confirm, but I didn't say this because I didn't do a very long introduction, but for those of you that don't know, I did work at the CDFI fund in between stints at RD. And from my recollection, and I don't think anything's changed, you can use a NACA TA award for some of that upfront development cost for your CDFI. And then the RBDG would be to sort of seed capital. And that has to be for business. So when it comes to homeownership lending, we don't have a seed capital program for homeownership lending. That's what we're trying to do in the pilot. But do I have that right, Linnell or others? Folks can use the TA award from CDFI funds still to help develop a fund.
That's correct.
Is there any other thing that folks should be aware of, Linnell, that might not know where some more TA money could be coming from, other agencies or foundations, or in New York specifically?
Not specific to New York. Like our TA with the WISTA, we help them set up like a one-year operational plan to get them to eventually becoming a CDFI. And it probably wouldn't be within that year's time frame because there's a lot of moving parts to it, but it helps to outline it and find out what partners do we need to pull in as far as like resources, who can we leverage, who's going to provide in kind, what kind of structure, how are we going to price our product. So all of those details we can start planning in that first year. So it really gets them jump started into being set up to actually be in a really good position to apply for that TA grant. And you can apply for that TA grant up to 3 years. They're a 2-year grant, but you can continuously apply for them. Once you're certified, you can stay in that space to continuously apply for a TA grant. You don't necessarily have to move into that FA space. We have a lot of CDFIs that are perfectly happy campers in the TA grant. So those are options there. If you're not a certified CDFI, you can actually get a sponsored entity, sponsoring entity, and generally it's a tribe or economic development. Sometimes it's a housing authority that can spin off, and they can apply for that initial TA, and you can only do that for the very first year. So the second year you would have to apply under that new entity's structure. So I hope that's helpful, just to kind of clarify the TA and the FA space.
Yeah, and certainly, and hopefully that helps you, Teresa. I don't think we've had the pleasure of meeting, but your cohorts here, Native CDFIs, are probably your best allies in picking their brain from time to time. And in the Northeast and in other places, there have been non-Native CDFIs that have helped foster and develop spin-off CDFIs that are focused specifically in tribal. And one of the sort of longstanding ones that comes to mind for me, and kind of your neck of the woods, is Coastal Maine and Coastal Enterprises and their work with Four Directions, and how they sort of mentored that and incubated the growth of the Four Directions Fund, which is a huge partner of ours with the tribes throughout Maine. So don't need to spend any more time on that, Teresa, unless you want to drop anything in the chat about something we didn't hit, or if we did hit the mark. But what else is in there, Andrea? I have not been tracking.
Well, I think it was Elaine who was speaking with us earlier from Spruce Roots. She had put a couple of things I thought of. It was difficult for us to access a lot of guaranteed programs and other things until we had 2 years of audited financials, which as a new CDFI was a barrier. We have now reached that requirement, so it's no longer an issue, but that's a good FYI for you folks that are wanting to start up. Other things is the redistricting issue. I haven't run into this as much with RD programs, but due to the unique way Alaska is set up, we cannot draw a line around our Native communities. So that's interesting. I'm glad our rural areas aren't hindering you there, because we think all tribes should be eligible in a rural area, but I know some of them are very contiguous to a urban center, and so there's been some challenges there. And then Josiah, had to sign off, so he said mahalo nui for talking stories with us here, and that was it.
Thank you for that.
To provide an update to that, so for the 1RD guaranteed loan program, so the BNI, REAP, CF, and we adopted it for the food supply chain, the issue on the audits for it to become a lender no longer requires 2 years. We do require an audited financial statement, but it's just the most recent year. So we lowered that barrier a little bit. Still have to have, the at least 1 year of existence, but so it hopefully that helps a little bit.
And this is where I don't mind agitating a little bit, partly because I know this Mark's interested and Ingrid specifically, but their leadership is also interested in situations where you might have heard no before. How can we revisit that? How can we recast that and fit you into a box, which we hope is growing, to Mark's point, but we understand that your institutions and your borrowers might not fit into our box. So where there are those challenges, we want to stay abreast of them, and we want to be as flexible as we can be, both for 1RD, which is the BNI program, the REAP program that Mark mentioned, and it also includes our community facilities and water environmental programs, and on the 502 guaranteed side. They're different programs, they're administered by different staff, but both have been open, especially in the CDFI sort of environment, on how we can do stuff we haven't been able to do in the past. So just because you heard no once, as Mark said, the rules have changed, the formal rules have changed, and we want to see about what we can do in the gray area as well, especially with Native CDFIs.
For the 502 guarantee, we don't have that 2-year requirement. So if you're interested in, I know that you met that requirement, right, as you stated, but we don't have, if you know of any others, that's not a requirement for us.
Well, we've moved into the last quarter of our hour. There were some thought-provoking questions that did not make it over into the chat. I think it's limited to how much I can cut and paste. So I'm tempted to put those in there, but before I do that, wanted to ask specifically if there's anything you're working on right now that's time sensitive for this summer, this fall, as we do have some programs that continue to have availability, like Mark had mentioned, and as we sort of move into fiscal year 23, which starts for us October 1st, excuse me. Anything that's time sensitive that you want to bring to our attention or talk through from your community and from your CDFI's perspective? Didn't get any bites there, so you'll see I did plunk in some sets of questions about how we could improve our programs moving forward. So Melissa, you want to come on camera and maybe read that first one I just dropped in there?
Sure. Also, thinking about these questions too, I guess, we've heard a lot of discussion about the barriers and some of the things that are proposed challenges. But I guess we're looking for any suggestions, any advice you have as far as RD's programs, our services, what can we be doing differently? And then, in the short term, but also thinking about the Farm Bill, because we have a lot of activity going on with the Farm Bill. And if we need to look at programs a little differently, do we need, is this something statutory that we need to look at? Is it something that we have flexibility in the program? Whatever those challenges are, that's what we really need to hear is, what do you see? What can we do in the short term? What do we need to be looking at in the long term that could help mitigate some of this and make it a little bit more approachable, where we can be doing more in Indian country? So I would like to open it up to that. There's a whole list of questions there, and they're all kind of related to that. But any suggestions you have, we're welcome to listening.
No, actually, I mean, it's interesting. I think part of the reason why 2018 was so impactful for me, we had just gotten approval from OMB to do the pilot. And so we were starting to initially share the word. It took another year for us to close the loans with the 2 Native CDFIs, but whether we like it or not, the wheels of government move somewhat slow. And it was fascinating watching the Native CDFI relending pilot come to fruition, because there was some internal politics with a small p that we had to navigate first. We were in constant communication with the Hill. We weren't advocating the Native CDFIs and specifically the South Dakota Native Homeland Ownership Coalition. They were providing the advocacy through the congressional delegation, but we had to then respond to the Hill and their questions about a potential pilot. OMB then came in with their hand, I'll just call it a hand. You can determine whether you think it's a heavy hand or light hand on your own, but they also had a stake at the table and were making sure that it fit into our authorities. And at different times, it was interesting because there never was an appropriation and there never was language authorizing the pilot. But even in the notes of some of our appropriations bill, the South Dakota delegation had lent support to the concept, which we have the ability to do pilots, but every little sort of nudge that the agency got helped us towards yes over an extended period of time. So to Melissa's point, we can't advocate for anything specifically in the Farm Bill, but every 5 years, you do have a chance through the Native Farm Bill Coalition and through other advocacy groups to help reshape and rethink and reimagine USDA's programs writ large, but specifically RD's programs and how they could be better tailored for you. So it's just a reminder that you're a part of that cog, and we want to be responsive to your questions and provide any what we call technical assistance to your questions, whether it's about regulations or program delivery, or in that case, statutory language. So, thoughts?
So I would ask, what are we doing right? What can we, if we're doing something right, what is it, and what can we do more of that makes it better, makes it right? So that would help us too. So we know there's challenges. Linnell? Or do we have any? I'm going to call him Linnell.
Poor Linnell.
Linnell.
We did hear from Spruce Root about some things that we were doing right, and I do think tip of the hat to our staff that is working constructively with your different institutions. To Chris's point, sometimes it's harder to find folks. So if you don't know who to talk with, or you haven't had a super productive history with our state office, that's part of our function with the tribal relations team, is to help cultivate those relationships and not to give up, and know that there's fruitful ground to work with you. So.
Yeah, and in my experience, I think working with RD staff has been really amazing and easily accessible. We had the opportunity of having someone stationed set up their office right within our tribal reservation. So we had easy accessibility and we were actually trained to package the products. So we were able to put those together specific to expedite the approval process. So I feel like all of our RD staffers are definitely very approachable. They'll definitely provide a lot of information to get you to navigate the process. So if there's any hesitancy in reaching out to your USDA representatives, set that aside and definitely pick up that phone and get that initial call started, because I think they're an amazing resource. And when we ultimately think about it, it's definitely worth it because we're all serving our tribal communities, and homeownership should be an opportunity for absolutely everyone. So if this is one of the first steps, then definitely take it.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, we only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to start the wrap up. People can feel free to follow up with any of us that are in the meeting today, and folks can drop their email or contact information, whatever they're comfortable in the chat. So we encourage you to do that. I just want to start the wrap up by thanking the Native CDFIs for their partnership and for your work in your communities, with or without our assistance. I can't say it enough. I think you all are the best thing going. The better you can utilize our programs to achieve your mission and not adapt your products, the better it's going to be for the people you're serving. And just know that I personally and professionally think the world of the work that you do. So keep up the good work in each of your communities. And then we'll start with Andrea, and then Ingrid and Mark, you'll have the last chance to say any words in closing. Andrea?
Yeah, I just want to echo Ted's sentiments that I really do think the Native CDFIs are the best game in town. It's the best way to get this capital to the communities, and we're happy to be a part of it. I'm desperately watching Congress as they move their bills through and wanting to do more in Indian country on all fronts. So anything we can do to get to yes, that's really what we're about. So don't be afraid to ask. And thank you again for your time today. Pass the mic.
Ingrid?
Myself. Likewise, we really appreciate the time. I know that it was a lot of silent moment, and we took the opportunity to ask a lot more questions, but I know that sometimes it's easier when you have one-to-one conversations. So as Ted offered, either call Ted or us directly. If you just want to talk about, hey, what does it take to do this? We're interested, but we're not sure. Can we get a little bit more detail? Any information that would make it easier for you to make those decisions, or that you're trying to convince one of your leaders or anything, we are here. And we would love to have those conversations with you more in depth to demonstrate the abilities that you would have of using our program. So thank you for your time today.
Mark, I'm going to put you on pause. Melissa or Chris, is there anything you'd like to say in closing? And we'll let Mark be the.
No, thank you so much. And again, I'm going to echo everything. Native CDFIs are, I wish there was one in every community, and providing services to our Indian country, because it is much needed. And so I appreciate, from a tribal perspective, I appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Just thank you all for being here, and thank you for answering our questions. And your feedback is so critically important, and that's why we bring our leadership on, so they can hear it directly from you, so we can work together to bring these things to fruition if possible. Thank you.
We had envisioned doing this in person, so it maybe would have felt a little different. We were all in the same room. I would have picked on someone other than Linnell, so thank you for letting me pick on you. And Mark, without further ado, you can wrap us up.
Thank you, Ted. And yes, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to connect today. If there's anything else we can do for follow-up, please let us know. I know we probably learned some lessons over the last couple of years with the pandemic, and unfortunately, I think it's some of the impacts probably were, say, harsher or harder on some of our more distant communities, lower income communities, and just sometimes just in communications have been a challenge. And as we mentioned earlier, if you had maybe some answers to some issues or questions, your needs that were negative in the past, please reach out. I think we are, seriously looking at how we can, change things and really get our programs to really helping and serving. As I think I mentioned early in my opening comments, is that we do have some programs that are underutilized, particularly in some of the set-asides for Native projects. So again, if you have any interest in a little bit more discussion on maybe how to plan for those, or maybe work in interest into some of those activities, even longer run, please let us know. We're glad to engage and see where how we can help out. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks to my colleagues. Linnell, I think you were going to say something about the next session.
Definitely. Well, first up, I just want to thank our presenters and moderation by Ted Bulow. So it was definitely very informative, and I'm sure many of our CDFIs had tons of takeaways. So just wanted to do a reminder that we do have our closing plenary, and that will be accessing the Federal Home Loan Bank's community investment programs. And that'll be closing out our day 2 of CAC, and that will begin at 3:15 Mountain Time to 4:15. So we look forward to seeing you all in our closing plenary. You all have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.